I'm Rabbi Nicki Greninger at Temple Isaiah in Lafayette, California. In today's How Do You Jew video, I will talk about how to set your table for a Passover Seder. One of the first things to know is that a Seder should be like a banquet of freedom. So when you are setting the table and you're thinking about which plates and which silverware and which cups and napkins to use, that as much as you can use fun and also beautiful decorations, that will make it feel like a very festive meal for you and your family and friends. A Seder should feel like a very relaxed meal. In fact, we are told to recline during the meal. So the custom is to actually have pillows on the chairs for you to use. So you may not want to do the first part of your Seder at the actual table where you plan to eat the meal. It's okay to set up your Seder in the living room or the family room or somewhere that you can sit on a couch and do the rituals of the Seder in that location. For the actual Seder table, you will need a Seder plate. A Seder plate typically has 6 items on it. You have the zeroa, which is a roasted lamb shank bone. You have a beitzah, which is a roasted egg. You also have hazeret, which is usually something like romaine lettuce or some type of bitter greens. It could also be horseradish. You have a spot on your Seder plate for karpas, or parsley is what is usually used for that. You have a spot on your Seder plate for haroset, which is usually a combination of fruits and nuts. And you also have a spot for maror, for bitter herbs. Typically in Ashkenazi families you would use horseradish. So you have all of these different items on your Seder plate, but you also need to have enough items for people to eat during the Seder. So you will want to have a bowl of parsley that people can use. You'll need to have some dishes or bowls with salt water in them so that your guests can dip the parsley into the salt water. You will need to have some maror, some of your bitter herbs for your guests to eat. And you'll also want to have a bowl of haroset to pass around for people to eat. Part of the Seder is to break the middle piece of matzah. And when you break that middle piece of matzah, you hide it, and that piece is called the Afikomen. But rather than hiding it by itself as a half of a piece of matzah, it's best usually to put it in some kind of cloth or covering. So you will want to make sure to set aside a cloth for your Afikomen. Some families might even have a decorated one that their children made in preschool or religious school, but make sure you have a cloth for the Afikomen. But in addition to this matzah, you'll also want to have some extra matzah for all of your guests to eat during the Seder itself. At your Seder, you will need to have your Haggadot, your books that you use for the Seder. There are many different Haggadot available, but whichever ones that you have, it's important to have them ready to use at your Seder. Of course, at your Seder, you will need to have wine glasses for everyone and enough wine for all of your guests to have at least 4 glasses. And in addition to the glasses that your guests have for their drinking, you will need to have a separate glass set aside for Elijah's cup, and that glass should also be filled with wine. Many families set aside a separate special goblet for Miriam. So Miriam's cup is not filled with wine. Miriam's cup is typically filled with water. A relatively new custom is to include an orange on the Seder plate. So this is a custom that comes from Dr. Susanna Heschel. In the 1980s, she went to speak on a panel at Oberlin College. And while she was there, she came across a Haggadah that included a story about a feminist Rebbe celebrating the Passover Seder. And one disciple asks her, "Rebbe, why is there a crust of bread on the Seder plate?" The Rebbe told the disciple about a young woman who had asked her rabbi, "What room is there in Judaism for a lesbian?" At that moment, the rabbi jumped up and shouted, "There's as much room for a lesbian in Judaism as there is for a crust of bread on the Seder plate." And that, the feminist Rebbe said, is why we have a crust of bread on the Seder plate here. So later, Susanna Heschel, when she heard about this story, she wrote that the Oberlin story was wonderful, and the ritual of placing a crust of bread on the Seder plate in response to it was inspiring to me. But I couldn't follow it literally. Including bread on the Seder plate destroys Passover. It renders everything chametz. I chose an orange because it suggests the fruitfulness for all Jews when lesbians and gay men are contributing and active members of Jewish life. Be fruitful and multiply is the Bible's first commandment, and we need to recognize the fruitfulness of gay and lesbian presence and encourage that presence to multiply. Over time, the ritual of placing an orange on the Seder plate has taken on additional meanings. It has been ascribed by some people to honor women's roles in Judaism and in the Seder. It has come to symbolize the value of having women serve as rabbis, and it also serves as a reminder to include all those who have been historically marginalized in Jewish life. Sometimes there is not enough room on the table where you plan to eat your meal for all of the different objects that you'll need for your Seder. So it's okay to set aside a separate table with some of the objects that you'll need. You will need candlesticks, and you will also need something for your guests to do hand washing. There are 2 hand washing rituals in the Seder, and it's easier to do it at the table instead of having everybody get up and go to the kitchen or the bathroom to wash their hands. There are a couple of tricks to having a really great Seder, and one of them is to have lots and lots of appetizers. That sometimes people think that when you're doing all of those rituals at the beginning of the Seder, that you have to wait to eat almost anything until the meal, other than maybe a little bit of matzah or a little bit of the parsley when you dip it into the salt water. But actually, when you say the blessing for the karpas at the beginning, when you dip that parsley into the salt water, you're actually saying a blessing for kind of appetizers, for foods that you can dip. So one trick is to have lots and lots of appetizers prepared, particularly fruits or vegetables and different kinds of dips, so that your guests can enjoy the food while you're doing the Seder, because you don't want everybody to rush through just to get to the meal. That the purpose of a Seder is to enjoy and have a very lengthy and fun meal, and if everybody's really hungry, that's not possible. Another way to really have a fun and engaging Seder is to bring instruments for all of your guests. And you can have little maracas or shakers, little bells, anything that makes noise and that can produce music, so that as you get to various songs in the Seder, everybody can sing along. Finally, if there are going to be kids at your Seder, you'll want to think about how to engage the kids, because that's actually the main goal of a Seder, is to pass on the story to the next generation. So you want to tell the story in a way that really engages kids, whatever age that they are. And for many kids, that is best done through the use of props. So for example, there are some kits that sell little finger puppets. You can get, or you could even make out of paper bags, some puppets of all the different characters in the story. You can look online for coloring pages and games and other activities that the kids can use and play with during the course of the Seder. So those items you'll want to prepare in advance as well. In today's world, one of the ways to make your Seder fun and engaging is actually to use music or videos. So you may want to set aside an iPad or tablet or phone or CD player where you could actually play some songs or videos related to Passover, so that as you tell your story, your guests engage in a fun and different sort of way. I hope you have a really great Seder. Chag Sameach!